5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is Chad here, and you're listening to My Alien Life.
Hello, futurelings and listeners around the world. It's Monday, April 20, 2020. Welcome to My Alien Life. Tonight, we look back at how this all started. It's my great honor to be able to bring you the stories that have shaped who we are. Together this week, we'll travel back in time to hear some of the stories that maybe you haven't heard before. These are the shows that started it all, real events that even today I find incredible. Be sure to listen Wednesday night to My Alien Life podcast. I am joined by my two best friends in a 2-hour interview that is full of foul language and inappropriate behavior, of course. I tell them about our group abduction in 1984. Jeff and Mark both remember our adventure that night with one important detail omitted: how and when they got home. You've heard this story. Now you get to hear all about what really happened that night when a flat tire literally transported them through what would be the most extraordinary adventures of their lives. That and more is coming up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brauer. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, 1, 0, and liftoff.
This show has been edited and remixed, and it originally aired February 22nd, 2019. Since then, we have had so many amazing guests and so many incredible listeners from around the world. Tonight, revisit my first kegger and a rift in time, or maybe I had too much to drink. You'll have to decide. Thank you for listening to My Alien Life. Why do we look at the universe with visual telescopes? We're looking with visual telescopes, radio telescopes, and other ways, but on Earth, we now look at everything via the mobile phone. There's a lot of people out there, myself and possibly millions of others, who are here to tell you that there's some kind of weird stuff and wild stuff going on right here on Earth, and more than likely right on your block or maybe even over your neighbor's fence. So maybe that guy next door whose skin doesn't quite seem to fit as some kind of extra, he's an extra something, but that scenario, sounds right out of an amazing movie, but the idea came from somewhere, so let's not be quick to label anyone. There's an explanation behind all the mysteries of the universe. We might just be looking in the wrong place at the wrong time, or looking the wrong way, or all of the above. Hey, this is Cameron Brauer. Thanks for having me. Check out my website, please, at www.alienlifepodcast.com, or you can get our latest download at iTunes, Facebook, Twitter, and of course, podbean.com. I appreciate everyone finding me on social media, and please email me your stories, photos, anecdotes, comments, whatever you'd like, and maybe I'll have you on the show one day and you'll be I know sometimes it's hard for us to communicate visually on the podcast, so I will be posting photos and other things there in the future so you can get fully what we are talking about here on the podcast. Like everything that is living that can evolve and change, so will this program, and I would love for you to be part of it as I share my own life's changing stories and hopefully yours as well. Last week we talked about what makes me tick, and we look back on how this all got started. This podcast is a UFO story. It's an alien story. It's an abduction story. It's a story of how my life was impacted by many events and what I have done to survive what myself and others definitely consider traumatic and terrifying events. And just know that it's absolutely true. I also think my story is different, quite different rather, than other stories that you've heard and are used to hearing. And I threw out there the name that I gave these visitors I've experienced last week. I call them IMOs, which is an acronym for what someone might consider alien spacemen or beings that use high technology to get to this planet, or one that uses a greater technology or other means to transport themselves and or others around this planet. I call them IMOs, which is basically intelligent mobile organisms. How and why I consider them intelligent mobile organisms and not an alien or gray, well, that's based on my own theory that involves information that I have collected. So that's information that was collected by myself voluntarily or involuntarily, and this directed me to believe that, yes, we could be visited by travelers, traveling space organisms. We could be experiencing alien expats who have taken up residence here, both. We could even be experiencing organisms who have always been here that are evolving right alongside of us, but have avoided us for the most part, and could have avoided humans for tens of thousands of years. How about time travelers? That's a possibility. Intra or interdimension or extra dimension travelers. Another possibility, holograms or projected images or extrasensory perception images from another world. Or yeah, you get the picture. So what is real? What do you think is real? None of us has a real simple concept, and yet everyone with an experience or theory is trying to pinpoint what happened to them, what they saw, along with who did it, and they must absolutely be from way out there somewhere. Why do they have to be from out there? Why do they have to be from anywhere? Let's just clear our minds and let's open up to the fact that we are experiencing some sort of amazing phenomenon, and they could be coming from anywhere, or they could have always been here. So let's talk a moment about IMOs, intelligent mobile organisms. So intelligent, are they intelligent? Absolutely. I'm certain they are definitely intelligent. There is very little evidence that shows us that they're not intelligent. So how intelligent? I have no idea. I could go either way on this one, so let's talk about that later. How about mobility? If they are from another planet, then they are extremely mobile. If they're not from another planet and just live out there in outer space, they are extremely mobile. If they're from this Earth and are just hanging out on the planet, they seemingly have the ability to move around or stay invisible or resist detection. My guess, that would be because they're an extremely mobile organism. So we'll talk about that. Yes, I said organism. They are organisms. Let's consider them organisms by a composite definition. Every dictionary kind of defines organisms a little bit differently. I don't even own a dictionary. I mean, this is coming straight off the internet. I'm sure somebody out there has an Oxford dictionary in the house somewhere, but according to definitions that I've looked at, organism is an individual or animal, plant, or single-cell life form. That's a definition that's online. And I have no idea if they're animals or plants or bacteria or single-celled or multi-celled. I think they're from at least a single-celled life form, but how about a multi-celled life form? They could be a whole new life form, taxonomic rank, and everything that we're totally unaware exists, and we need to talk about that. I definitely have my own opinions on all three of those things, how intelligent they are, what kind of mobility they have, and whether or not they're organisms, and definitely we'll get into that and talk. So intelligence, mobility, and whether they are organisms as we define organisms are three things that are worthy of a podcast episode. Probably a podcast episode each on all three of those topics. One of the things that fascinates me is that if, and that's a big if they are from out of our atmosphere, what kind of organization does it take to get them here and then get them back to where they came from? That would imply there's a culture out there interested in us earthlings. So now this is just an ethnocentric view from a guy from Montana, but I'm taking all I know from humans and I'm formulating my opinions about creatures just like everybody does that may not even get what we are. They may not even think of us as a life form, but there would almost be a cultural aspect to any outside organisms that visit this planet. All humans have culture. We say that humans have no real instincts like building a nest or congregating and flying on instinctual directions every fall, but we can argue that culture is our instinct in which we override a long extinct instinctiveness in order to survive as a race. We're a species that creates with others in order to survive and propagate. IMOs interact with each other, I would say, and have culture. From my anthropological background, which was my university degree decades ago, I believe by definition they have a culture, so they must be some kind of organism. Does that work both ways? I don't know. Probably, although I'm questioning what I believe. Yeah. So does the presence of culture make a being of some kind, whether it is from the planet Earth or other place, does it make that being an organism? And if it's an organism, is it engaging in culture? I'm still saying yes, although there might be exceptions. So I'm sorry, this is a concept. I know it's hard to follow and it's a little technical and it's a little wordy and, it's not easy for me either. So a culture is considered to be the interactions of humans with their environment and humans and with each other and then the product of that interaction. And that's about as simple as you can put for a definition of culture. There's a anthropologist called E.B. Taylor who defined it as, in the words of a true anthropologist, that complex whole, which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and other capabilities or habits acquired by man as a member of society. And that describes us as humans. But the question here would be, if they are not human, is their interaction with each other and the product of their interaction considered culture? It would be if you considered they may abide by laws, have customs, or even make art. Maybe they make music. If they make anything together that is used for a group, then they have formed culture, and by definition. However, my take on what personal information I have is that they do the basic minimum to form culture. I doubt they, and I mean the IMOs I've experienced, are pleased or produce culture for pleasure, but they do enough or the minimum enough to have culture. But that isn't why they keep living and producing. I'm sure it's not for love of each other, and I'm sure it's not for the love of Earth. I had to ask myself, what do they want? Why are they here? So yeah, that's a question I think that everybody has. What do they want? And why are they here? They're obviously interested in us. The bottom line is they are interested in us enough to make a hobby out of observation and interacting with humans without our permission. They're getting something valuable in return out of watching us. If they were only able to recognize missions or trips to observe humans, and that was the only thing they did as a group, then absolutely, they have culture. It's doubtful there's a unilateral effort or some kind of rogue being out there looking into how fascinating that we are. So as a group, as a culture, they're observing us. Again, it's looking at it from an anthropological view, and if we were really into it, we could have an entire series of podcasts on cultural philosophy of unearthly beings. That would be a good one. I want to remind everyone that, again, when I talk about intelligent mobile organisms or IMOs, I'm talking about organisms that I myself have experienced. Listeners out there, you may have experienced something totally different. Next week, I'll introduce you to what I saw and experienced a little bit in more detail. But for now, I want to look at what could be out there and why they're interested in us as humans. So absolutely, there's something intelligent out there watching us. Yes, we all agree on that. And in order to do that, they must have some sort of concerted group effort. By most accounts, that seems to be the consensus of so many that have experienced this and experienced other things that they can't fully explain. How mobile are they? It seems that these intelligent observers have a reliable mode of transportation to be mobile, although there are many accounts of crashed vehicles that are reported to come from somewhere beyond the bounds of Earth. It would seem logical that if we were being observed from beings from somewhere else, they would need technology to get them here. There are a few possibilities that would solve the transportation needs for someone visiting us. If they were here already, they could walk. They could move between points in some way as an individual without walking and without the aid of a vehicle. What would that be? What would that look like? They would have a vehicle and could make it, or they could make them mobile only on this planet. Some kind of transportation that is totally stealth and would be an example of a superior technology that they could actually be on Earth, but we couldn't detect them. They could also have a short-range vehicle that could take them out of the Earth's atmosphere and maybe only as far as the moon. They could have a vehicle that would move them around the solar system, or a vehicle that could transport them between galaxies. They could have several different vehicles, each with its own specific range. They could time travel. Maybe they're just Earthlings like we are. Other than a version of walking, most other forms of mobility would involve a lot of technology. What if there was an organism that was born with an instinct of transportation engineering, that was a cultural being that was able to produce many instinctual products while engaging in culture with other organisms that lived together and worked on these projects together? That would seem to fit that space organism paradigm and answer the question as to why they're so smart. A being would have to live a long time to be educated in the level of physics and engineering that would make time travel and living in space possible. It seems that whatever is watching us would likely be technologically mobile, but don't let that cloud your thinking. Some people need to stay objective. We need to stay objective. Let your mind learn from the hard data. Let your mind learn from the facts. The odds are that we can't predict, or we may not even understand how they are mobile. To me, that may be the most concerning aspect of these invaders on our personal space. One of the questions that I ask myself, and I have no doubt everyone asks, is what do they want? They get the fact that we live and reproduce, probably, and will build dwellings to protect us. They don't get all these little things that we do, I'm sure, like brushing our teeth and shaving and sitting for hours looking at a mobile phone. They understand possibly that we produce because there's suddenly more of us, but I doubt they know really how and why we do that. They recognize us as many individuals. A person with red hair may be different to them as a person with blonde hair, vastly different, like a different subspecies. They don't understand that, I'm sure. They don't understand why we build our houses that look different. I believe that they feel these different houses possibly could be for different species. Again, this is based on what I know and my personal experience. Your personal experience may make you think otherwise. They're trying to learn about the things that they don't understand. So, like, why do we open from cans and drink from them? Just about anything we do would be odd to them, and just about anything they do would be odd to us. Likewise, I don't really think that they know how our bodies work. They know that we have bodies and they know that we have internal organs, but they don't have a detailed idea of how that works. They know our circulatory system, respiratory system, and digestive system exist. They understand them to a degree. They understand a lot of stuff at a molecular level because I believe that they are very, very scientifically minded in physics and mathematics, but they still have questions. I don't believe they mess with our bodies. I don't believe that they come down, and I don't believe people are getting probed. I believe our minds fascinate them and they can't figure out why we do what we do. I don't know why we do what we do, but like, for example, fun, things we do for fun, I'm sure they wouldn't even get. They fight for their survival, but that is such deeper level than will ever understand. I don't believe that they've ever evolved to love. I don't believe that they really have fun. But empirical type data, they love that. It blows their mind. They spend their time, if you can call it that, because they don't live in a world of time, they battle waves of energy in the universe and trying to understand threads. That's their version of war. It's not violent. They're trying to cope with that energy that comes from nature. Nature's huge. Nature's dangerous in space. Nature's dangerous on Earth. They'll try to use new discoveries to adapt and become better for no reason other than that's what they are, a coping, surviving organism. Yesterday I was browsing through Twitter and there was this headline, and everybody probably saw it, or most of you saw it if you're interested in this stuff, but it says scientists have uncovered 300,000 new galaxies, 200 scientists from 18 countries collaborating using low-frequency array telescopes in the Netherlands to find galaxies too faint, have found these galaxies previously undetected from Earth. So think about this. Scientists believe that a galaxy has an average of 100 billion stars. That's an approximate for the Milky Way, our Milky Way. That's huge. That's huge, huge. They estimate that an average of 160 billion planets exist per galaxy. Hubble estimates are 100 to 200 billion galaxies in the observable universe. Why so many? You have all this matter interacting with other matter, and you expand that to a global level and even to a universal level. It doesn't even seem possible to have that much matter, but everything's connected. Matter changes matter, and then there are seemingly empty voids in open space that probably really isn't empty. Dark matter. Dark matter could make up 85% of the universe. We can't see it. We can't touch it. We can see the effects of dark matter in the universe. Without it, universes theoretically would be in disarray, with planets flying out of orbit and galaxies wouldn't have that beautiful swirl that keeps the billions of celestial bodies intact and in some predictable order that we know is predictable. And we can measure some of that even. We can predict the existence and the effects of dark matter on a solar system or galaxy. And again, everything is connected. Everything connected. I want us to think of the universe as something like the World Trade Center, with office furniture being planets and stars in the office itself being some kind of galaxy. Inside the walls of the World Trade Galaxy are pipes and wires and cables and vents. All these things providing information in molecules like hydrogen, oxygen, and wires delivering electricity. There's lots of things happening in the office, right down to the subatomic particle. Then a human, he or she causes atoms to bump around in the room even more, and the lights come on and the computers turn on. There's a tremendous amount of activity in that room, and all starting with one body made of hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. That office galaxy changes like galaxies in the universe. That human body is exhaling CO2, and it absolutely changes the room. What if you took that office and everything in it and made it to space galaxy scale? You spread everything out there, so there are light years between stars and planets and other things floating around inside that office. Would a 5'10" human walking into the office cause the same commotion as when the office was a 400 square foot room? Why not? Why wouldn't it? If there's a presence of dark matter, wouldn't a person set that in motion, causing everything else, including atoms in motion, causing everything in the room to change, even to the slightest degree that could be measurable with the right equipment? Why couldn't that happen in space? It would be almost like everything in the universe is connected. The wing of a butterfly, not only changing the space around itself, but perhaps changing the universe itself. So why not? Is everything in the universe connected? Are we connected with a star that is 71 million light years away? Why not? We know there are definitely You and I were made out of star stuff. We know that. A few billion years ago, you were floating, albeit in a different shape and form, out in a galaxy somewhere in the universe. That makes you connected to the former solar system or galaxy. And you still are connected because the matter that makes you, you, is for the most part elementally the same, except the arrangement could be a little different. The complexity is still the same. So what's the connection? What universal thread connects you to the universe in a different time and in a different place? What is a universal thread or thread of the universe? You step outside on a clear night and see something, interesting in the sky, and you point to it, and in turn that causes motion in the atoms around you, and the star stuff that your hand is made of just set off a chain reaction. And that could and probably does change a galaxy billions of years later or instantly. Who knows? These universal threads connect you to anything else that could provide information on a universal scale to anyone out there who can read and interpret that information if they had the technology to build a kind of a supercomputer capable of analyzing and interpreting that kind of data. Is it possible that these threads that connect us to the universe is capable to relaying information about everything in the universe to everything else in the universe in real time or in any kind of time, past, present, or future? We know there must be something holding all this together, even though we can't see it or identify it. There are threads in this universe connecting every single particle to the one next to it, or to the smallest of particles billions of light years away, and there's information in these threads. What else can these threads be used for other than communicating or collecting data? What about time? Is there something undiscovered that allows us to time travel or to travel billions of light years in a fraction of the time that we are used to measuring? This has been something that's been on my mind since, probably since I was in 6th grade. I knew the universe was big, but I didn't know how big. If there were only millions of planets, then why would aliens come here? Why this random planet? What kind of beacon was being sent out there notifying the universe with our street address? We send out a lot of radio signals, and yes, that could be it. I really didn't know much about radio signals, so even back then I was thinking about how we're giving up our location and credit card info to these. But then there were things that happened to me, and there were several different experiences where I accidentally received information. I also observed the IMOs, intelligent mobile organisms, in the world as one of them. I was able to see things which gave me some limited insight in how the universe might work in terms of this thread thing, this idea, this theory I came up with years later. This idea of universal threads made sense to me. I could point to a star in the night sky and somewhere else in the universe, or everywhere, the universe instantly changed because I moved my arm, because everything in the universe is connected. And possibly there are beings out there with unimaginable technology, and they look at all this information coming from these infinite threads that connect everything. It's like a universally scaled version of a string and 2 tin cans with this little gray guy holding one of the cans up to his ear somewhere. If the little gray guy has an ear. I don't think they have ears. From what I know, the intelligent mobile organisms, I know they're a little different, but that's many, many podcasts in the future, and we may address that. When I was in 8th grade, I went to my first kegger. My best friend, who was a freshman, drove us to this grass-covered gully out in the country that could accommodate maybe a fire pit and about 20 parked cars. I didn't drink. I wasn't going to drink alcohol, and I didn't back then. But since everyone was older, I kind of found myself in a quiet spot. I was hunkered down on top of the only rock in the whole area, and it was about 10 feet from a roaring fire pit that they had going there. This nice senior dude that I knew from my hometown, his name was Eric. He came over and noted that I was just sitting there and wasn't drinking. And he asked me if I wanted a grape pop, as he put it, and I was really appreciative of that. And I took him up on that, and we walked over to his truck, and he pulled out this grape soda that he had behind. The soda looked like it had been there for years, but I was just glad to have it. It was a warm soda that was behind the seat for a long time, and it was the same temperature of the truck, and it was really cold outside. So I walked back over to my place on the rock and sipped some warm grape soda and sat there watching that fire. It was about 10 p.m. exactly, and I knew that because I had to be home at 12 midnight, and I had just checked my watch. I remember looking at the watch again, and it was 10:02, and I stared at the really, really big fire. It was roaring by that time, and there were people throwing wood on it. Some people had brought some fresh wood, and it was a great fire. There was probably 3 cars left, maybe 8 people trying to make a good party out of a small gathering, and everyone was standing in front of the cars to my left, just to my left, about 30 feet from the fire. And I remember a moment where I took a sip of soda and all the sounds of the fire and the people that just kind of disappeared, and I was all of a sudden aware of this ringing in my ears. And then as I was looking across the fire pit at an object that was about 30 feet away, just right across the fire pit, and I had walked by there earlier, and I immediately recognized that as the can of grape soda that looked exactly like mine. And I wondered for a moment who else was drinking grape, and I suddenly realized there was no roaring fire in the fire pit. There was just a small amount of smoke rising in the air, and the light that I was seeing in the area was from the headlights of one of the cars parked to my left. And there was just enough light to illuminate 4 people standing by another car to my left, and just enough light to illuminate that grape soda that sat right in front of me, maybe 30 feet away. And it was sitting there, and I was pretty sure it was sitting on a gopher mound. You know, the mound of dirt that the gophers dig a hole, they pile up. And at that point, there was no ringing in my ears, and a slight breeze drifted through the gully just then and made the grass move, and it seemed it made the people move at the same instant. No one was talking. Other than that little bit of breeze, it was quiet. The headlights of the car were slight yellowish, and I was really aware at that moment that the battery in that car was probably going dead, and it was much colder. I had a sweatshirt and a jean jacket on, and I buttoned the jacket a couple of buttons. And I walked over to the grape soda, and at that moment, standing there and buttoning another button, it was very apparent I was no longer holding a near full can of warm grape soda in my hand. So I reached down and I picked up the can of grape soda, and yeah, it was sitting on a gopher mound, and the soda was warm. It felt exactly like it did in weight and temperature as it had when I had it in my hand before. How did it get there was now racing through my mind, because I know it was mine, and I tasted it. That was my grape soda. And I thought again about how it got there. The next thought made me wonder why everything was so quiet. I thought about my watch and wasn't going to look at it. It didn't seem later, but 2 other kids were getting into one of the cars and they were leaving. So I made myself look at my watch. 3:45. Oh my God. I was terrified. How could this happen? This was way before the days of roofies, and I wasn't drinking alcohol, so I yelled at my friend Scotty. Scotty immediately yelled back to me, "Hey, it's almost 4 a.m. We have to get out of here. Why didn't you wake me up?" On the way back home, which only took 20 minutes, I asked Scotty why he was sleeping, and he said he didn't think he was, but that was the only thing he could think of, because we had no idea why and how all that time flew by. We never ever talked about that again. I wanted to. I made segues to conversations, but I absolutely could not ask that question or talk about it. It had nothing to do with fear. It just seemed like an uninteresting conversation to me. I wondered thousands of times how that could happen, but I just couldn't have that conversation with Scotty. I walked in my house undetected that early morning, and my parents had no idea how late I got home. That night I had a dream that I had many times since I was maybe in 2nd, maybe 3rd grade. I was in a room and all the walls and the ceilings were all turquoise. There was no light in the room, but it was overly bright in there, very turquoise. 2 tall yellow-haired women were in the room, and I looked up because one was behind me with her hands on my shoulders. In this version of the dream, Scotty was standing in front of me. He was looking straight at me, but without any emotion. His eyes were looking almost through me. An identical yellow-haired woman was standing to his left side. He looked up at her. I have no recollection of what kind of clothes these women were wearing. The yellow-haired woman or thing standing across from me, just standing right next to Scotty, was holding that damn grape soda. The yellow-haired woman seemed fascinated by it. Was it a he or was it a she? At times I seemed to drift in and out of that dream as I tried to determine what kind of woman this was, or if it was a woman at all. The yellow-haired woman with the soda reached out her arm a great distance, and for a moment I could see the can of soda in her odd hand, which was like the color of greenish-brown mud. And the hand didn't seem to have enough fingers, even though the shape looked like a human hand and the shape was rough like some kind of crude mitten. The soda can disappeared, or rather faded away, and as she pulled her arm back and her hand met up with some kind of resistance that finally let go, and her arm and her hand jerked back in the same motion with a wet, audible plopping sound. I don't remember being amazed by a disappearing can of grape soda. I do remember a slight ringing in my ears. The room began to feel dense like we were in water, but we could still breathe, and I could still breathe for sure just fine. Then the walls became rounded, and the color turned to the same greenish, brown, yellow-haired woman hand color. The woman in front of me suddenly blended into the wall and the wall color with the exception of her hair. Everything in the room, including these 2 women, were the same color. The one in front of me started disappearing into the wall, or it was like she was color blending into the wall and fading away except for the hair. That bright yellow shiny hair that wasn't really hair at all, but it did look familiar. It wasn't until around 2 years later that I realized that this wasn't hair at all. The color was spot on, but it wasn't hair. It looked like a long hat that started at the top of her head and extended down or back slightly. The 2 women behind me were now gone, and so was the yellow shiny hat. Scotty was still in the greenish-brown mud-colored room with rounded walls. He is looking directly at me and opens his mouth slightly as if he is going to speak, and then I wake up. After getting up, I spent the entire day in the house. I could smell the inside of that round room all day. The smell was like burnt meat being fried in a cheap aluminum fry pan. It was very close to that smell that I knew very well because it was the smell that my mom would make in the kitchen every Sunday when she would cook steak on that old aluminum frying pan we had. An odor that I would get used to, and an odor that I had smelled too many times to count. The smell of the dream lingered through that Sunday and most of Monday, which was a school day. I could also feel those hands on my shoulders, but the feeling made me think of much longer arms. Hands connected to arms that were miles long, maybe even hundreds of miles. During math class, which I always hated, I was asked to solve a problem on the chalkboard. I reluctantly went to that board, and for a brief moment, I could see the whole problem and the solution in my head. I was very excited. I was going to write it all on the board quickly and perfectly and impress everyone. Then I had the sensation of my shoulders all the way to my hands, like they were going to sleep, or something was exiting my hands, arms, and shoulders through my shoulder blades, like millions of tiny threads exiting my body all at once. I wrote the problem expertly on the board, straight out of my textbook. The solution and the threads had been pulled from my mind and from my body. And I remember thinking, so what? When's the next time I'll ever use algebra? So if any one of you ever experienced a connection to the universe or another thing you can't explain, or a memory you can't explain, or sudden knowledge you can't explain, I can tell you that every tiny speck of the universe is connected, and we can do things as humans we consider unimaginable. We just need to figure out a way to look at and interpret the unimaginable, because there are a lot of unimaginable things out there. There's a lot of unimaginable things right here in our own neighborhoods. If we start to look at the universe differently, maybe we can even look at the earth differently. If you look at a drop of water in a pond with a naked eye and then look at the same drop with a microscope, we can see all kinds of things. Or if we use an electron microscope, we can see detail of even a single-celled organism. Take the same drop and freeze it or boil it, and we discover physical properties that are an absolute miracle and a mystery at the same time. But now, when it is so important to be objective and to look at our universe with unfocused eyes, we insist on looking at the world through a mobile phone screen. So get out there, see the world. This is My Alien Life, and I'm Cameron Brauer. Join me next time for another fresh and raw podcast.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.